Well, welcome to the Uncertainty Project. This is John and Kyle with the Uncertainty Project. Looks like I've upgraded my situation here, and John has ended up in an attic in the middle of the woods somewhere. so, um, but uh, but yeah, so with these talks, we talk about product leadership and particularly strategic decision making with people who operate in environments of radical uncertainty. And today we have Lee. So Lee is a product and strategy leader who's also just damn good at aligning organizations. And just a bit about Lee's background. So Lee's led engineering teams at Apple for 7+ years total. And actually, when we met, Lee was running program management at App Dynamics. At the time, Lee was an advisor, the company that John and I were both at, AgileCraft. And since then, you were at Automation Anywhere, IBM, and now you're currently director of product at NVIDIA. Lee's also just one of the most helpful and thoughtful people, especially about technology. He seems to really know everyone, kind of a super connector. So first off, yeah, thanks a ton for taking the time today, Lee.
Yeah, anytime, guys. Like anything that I can do for you guys. I think the big thing, it's like me and Kyle go actually way back. I forgot, like it was like actually when you said that dynamics, that's a long time ago. Actually,
I know. Yeah,
it's
that's
like
funny.
dog.
I was looking at the years. Yeah, I was looking at the years. Like, wow, that was a long time ago.
It's like dog years in tech world. But yeah, like a lot of things are pretty uncertain, especially in the space I'm in today at NVIDIA. It's a pretty wild and amazing ride. They're, Currently, I'm also doing engineering now, so they give me product and engineering, which is a good thing. But can't complain.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Actually, to start, can you kind of just talk through like your role at NVIDIA right now? And also, it is really interesting, especially kind of the combination of product and engineering. I think you, of course, have gone. You've led engineering teams specifically and product teams. Like, what does your role look like right now at NVIDIA?
I think the big thing what we're trying to figure out, like, is we're trying to manage and like a lot of the infrastructure and make sure it's like highly efficient for both like our internal and external customers. A lot of the principles that we talked about, like that I'm part of the communities at like FinOps Foundation and stuff like that. But it's under the same premise, like as performance engineering, and there's a marketing term now for it and like a community, but now it's FinOps Foundation. But a lot of it's just making sure like all the infrastructure and everything that's everyone's using is highly efficient and there's no waste. And that applies to like our internal and also our external customers.
For like,
So
and so in your role right now, like, what is that? Like, if you think about, I guess some of the uncertainty that impacts your role, like, what does that look like? Like, what do some of the decisions look like that that kind of you're making on a consistent basis?
we're trying to get more people in the front door when everything's like sold out everywhere, right? It's in the news.
Yeah,
So it's kind of amazing that like all the supply and then this like you're in the center of this AI universe. And then like everyone's trying to consume and use it and build all these new things. It's like what they say. It's like like what Jensen was saying like a couple weeks back. It's like the iPhone moment, right?
right.
Like how many people have experienced that twice? And luckily I did it at Apple, and now I'm over here experiencing it the second time. So yeah, it's interesting. And like with all that, like things growing that fast, things moving that fast, there's like there's always uncertainty. So it's like what do you do? People are accustomed to doing their thing, then they have to like whenever you have to flex or try new things or go outside your normal like circle or just space, it's really uncertain, right? So like, I think from those standpoints, it just becomes really interesting as you're watching it. But luckily I was at like startups and Apple and those things, so I'm kind of like immune or to it. And it's just like, okay, let's just go what's next and stuff like that. But you kind of figure
Sounds
it
like,
out.
sounds like the other factor, Lee, is speed, right? You've, like you said, two great opportunities where, I'm sure the decisions you're making here are happening fairly quickly, maybe compared to some others. When the moment is striking, like you said, how does that affect the speed at which people are expecting decisions to be made?
I think at any point when you're trying to like grab that much market share or anything, and especially in your center, like speed is how do you put it? You don't recognize how fast you're moving until you actually take a step back. It's like you ever got like I know in high school everyone gets like beater cars, they get the first Corolla or whatever, or Prius, and then they actually buy a car that they want in their 20s, and you're like, when you're going 80, you're like, wow, this car's really that fast. You're going at 80, but you're like out of that moment. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like that when you're in here. You're like, wow, this thing's really going that fast. So, like the speed it just becomes a norm. But like when you take a step back, it's kind of interesting. Like if you examine how fast you're going. For me, like I've been in always these high-paced environments that move really fast. Like they always wanted demand and like these different things. So like I said, like when I was talking to a friend like the other day, it's we're just kind of like immune and used to it, so we just go with the flow. But like when you actually realize how fast things are moving, like I've only been here since like January. Like I think the whole world like shifted from January until now, and like we're in it in the middle, so you don't really recognize it. But when you talk to other people outside looking at it, if I haven't talked to Kyle and John, I'm talking about it right now. It's like in the last 6 months, things just went like 180 degrees and 180 degrees back, and we're probably going another 360 around the way. So it's like so fast that you don't like. I don't realize those we're in here, but you like talking to you guys as we're doing this thing right now. It's like quite amazing, actually.
Are there any like Yeah, I was curious. I mean, one, like your timing is impeccable with these things. It's I feel like every time I talk to you in a position, there's just crazy growth going on. I mean, yeah, you talk about new product category when it comes to Apple. Like the explosive growth of a product category and defining that product category when it comes to NVIDIA. When you like take a step back and you look at that speed, is there anything that like stands out as far as kind of the ability to I mean strap in operationally, or like what kind of stands out when you take a step back and you look at that, like what kind of helps navigate those situations?
I think the big thing in all those is like like I hope it's not like a record on repeat, but like you have to have great leadership, and like the leadership then has to align the organization. So like I think there was like one of my good friends, like Barry, we always talk about him a lot. Like he wrote like this curve of like communication. Like and I think you guys went through this at Agile. Like when you're first a startup and there's like 25 people or like 10 people, if someone said just everyone move left to the office, everyone would go left. And if someone says move right to the office, all 25 people move right. Then like as your organization grows, the cost of communication is so valuable at that point, right? So like now imagine if you're in that same office again, everyone, and it says like 1,000 people there. What typically happens in these massive organizations, like when you say go left, it's a slow progression to the left, and then you say go right, it's slow progression to the right. The one companies that figure it out is where like the leadership's strong and then communication somewhat decentralized, so then people innately understand if I have to go left or I have to move this direction, everyone's moving in that direction. Crystal clear. I think those are things where it really changes. I think even at your early days at Agile Craft, and you can even think about like the early days of a lot of these tech companies before they hit this massive growth, is like that's able to do it. But then the companies that flourish from like that level when they, the IPO or they get like Series D or whatever, is that those ones that hit the upper echelon is when they actually can control all that stuff and they just like see their leadership. It's like analogy would be like if you played basketball with your core team since you're like 5, and then you lived in the same town, then you guys played high school, and like sometimes they win championships, sometimes they don't. But you know where the pass is going to be, you know how he's going to shoot, you know how he's going to catch it in his stance or whatever. Those are the things that's like, and you have a coach that teaches you those positions of leadership. But that's the alignment that you have to have and like focus that you have to have with your teammates. You kind of be no different than how you're running like a company and stuff. Like you just have to know each of you and kind of know intricately, like how do people need to shoot their jump shot, or how do people need to make a layup, or how do I catch it? I just got like it's no different. Like this person's going to code, this person's going to run this person's going to market this. Everyone's intertwined with each other, and like everyone's next step.
So when you talk about that, so for example, with you, especially going to these organizations, you come in from the perspective of having an idea of what good alignment and communication looks like. is there almost if you're like think about that as like a scorecard, like what do you kind of look for and start to I mean really even start to kind of implement to
And that's interesting.
improve alignment.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is like you have to understand like every culture is a little bit different, right? So I could walk you through like at Apple, like to get like alignment and that you had to execute, right? So it's more like if you and then you can take two sides of the coin. There's always like a double side. So like execute and then communication, right? So you have to do both, but like execution was highly valued more, right? Then like in NVIDIA, it's like it's a balance. Like it's like communication and then you teach, but you also at the same time you still have to execute. But you can kind of see how that weighs. Then like once those things in both environments, even like when I was in the startup at Dynamics, it's pure execution. Then you're like doing sales and marketing from that standpoint. So it's like you're still teaching, but like I think the big perspective is like those two sides of the balance, like have build trust and that relationship where people can depend on you more. And when you say like, "Hey, this is how I feel," or "This is what I think," then it holds more weight. So like for me, as I've been growing up and I've been doing this for a while. So initially, it's just all about execution, execution, and communication. But as I've been coming here and learning, like a lot of it's like teaching and like learning, like kind of like understanding the mistakes I made before and trying to not do them again, but like do them in a better way or a different approach. Then like, but the net outcome that I want is like a relationship to be built. So then we could start aligning and like working on things together. I think that's the big thing, like how like my perspective changed about that. It's like more like how do we align the organization? How do we align each other? So then we together can build the next big things. Like selfishly, like any person, as you step into these things and be highly confident, you could always say like, I can do this. I can't. I can do this myself. I can do this faster. But the things like to build like teams, organizations, companies, you have to do it as like a we. And like even though I can do it better, can I teach the like next other five people to do it as well as I am, and then can they then do it better than that? I think that's like the beauty of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, on that point, Lee, that boundary between the leaders that are there to teach and not step in, and then the teams that are growing, learning. What have you seen some of the most effective ways are? It's difficult, right? That tendency you described, I think a lot of leaders go through that transition, but the ones you've seen that have done it well, or in your experience when you've done it well, what does it feel like? Like how does that boundary get established?
That's an interesting one, and I talk about this like with my friends a lot sometimes, and like as we talk about, I never really understood that until I had kids, and until like they got older, and I think that's a profound moment for me, right? Like there's like again like it's hard because like at some point you think you're like mentally and like in your mind you think you're like okay, I know all this stuff, I did all this stuff, then like you forget that like a lot of people are not on that same level and things like that. So when I had kids, like it made me understand like, hey, how do I take what I know and then teach my kids how to apply this stuff? And it's no different. Like how do I take what I know like at this really different types of level, and then how do I teach it to like my staff, my peer, stuff like that. And then the things like what you said, like even like this is probably like a rub or frustration, like a lot of times I could say like I could do it better, or even the people like above me is like, hey, I could do it better. But then the patience not to step in, the patience to allow someone to fail fast and then understand it, then teach each other. I think that is really hard to do. And I think that itself is like hard for people to recognize. And I think that is like a learning moment. Like if I worked with you guys on the project and stuff, and like, I probably did it like 5 times before. I actually mean Kyle go through this a lot, right? Like when he was like when he started, like I wanted to tell him everything for like 5 hours to tell him how to do X, Y, Z, stuff like that. But then you also have to like for Kyle to be where he's at today, he had to grow and go through those. And like for me to watch that and where he is from before and now, it's amazing. But I can't tell him everything. I have to let him experience, him craft his own thoughts, and be patient enough to watch him do that. And then hope, and the other thing is hope that he will get there, right? So that's the other thing. You have to trust in the process, like Joel Embiid. But just kidding.
Yeah, and that that's one example too, where you've got younger teams that, it's fairly obvious they're growing and learning, but there's also the other end of the spectrum where you're working with a team of experts that are even better, more knowledgeable than you, but yet they're still looking to you for guidance, for alignment, for decision making. I'm sure you've seen that in some of the places you've where. How would you contrast that with I've got a young team, they're following some steps that I've done myself, I know this very well, versus I have to set I have to set up an environment here so these incredibly talented people can thrive, and I don't have the knowledge that they do, for any number of reasons. Um, Arguably, that's harder, right?
Yeah, it's it's always a lot harder, like with people that know more about the knowledge and like are different levels. So even the actually the easier part is like working with teams and building organizations so that effect is like that I can do. Like convincing like or working and aligning like executives to see the same point of view and stuff like that. I think those are things that where you have to take a step back and understand like the principles and the culture of like what everyone's trying to force for. It's like at those levels too, like everyone's not like they don't have a point of view because they're being like malicious or just trying to challenge you. They have a point of view or like you're hired as experts and they have your point of view because that's what they're hired for and that's what they're specifically doing. That's what you're trying to drive. So if you look at the incentive, it's not like if you take a step back and look at the incentive, it's all meaningful. They want the best for the company and stuff like that. Then the question is like when you communicate to them, it's always like an a la carte. You have to communicate to them in their way, but also think about how you want everyone to align on the cohesive decision. So like the biggest thing that I like hate and like I even tell myself sometimes is like when you communicate to like executive leadership or senior leadership, there has to be always an outcome we're aligning to that we're going to take a next step to do. Because like the time talking to them, like if I had to talk to like the CEO, it's a lot of money, right? For he's going to spend 5 seconds with a mere mortal. So I have to get some next step question to get like so we can always propel to the next steps, and those are big things. So a lot of that again for like leadership, it's like aligning on the outcome and like it's they will say their point of view and may hurt, but it's fine. But like because as a company perspective, it's all great, right? And that's why for me, like a lot of times, I'm really really super humble when I approach those sessions, and I just pretend I don't know crap. Because otherwise, like if I do, it's always a learning time. So for me, like life and everything else is always learning. So
So Lee, I want to ask more about that. I love that I don't know crap humility angle, because a lot of what we are exploring here as we study uncertainty is how important that is, right? That acknowledging what you don't know, as a mindset, and it is a little bit of personality, but I'm sure it's something that can be developed. In your career, it sounds like you feel like that's something you've carried with you and had good results from the I don't know crap argument. Tell us more about how that's helped you in situations where, you've faced a lot of uncertainty.
uh, like it's like even if I'm a subject matter expert in like this one field, even the best person is like top 10. Like just by probability of like how many people there are in the world, right? And then like even if you stratify that to like your sector, there's always someone will do it better, someone will do it more, or someone will do it better, faster. It's just like even if you take like Olympic records, like a record is meant to be broken, right? So like even you just take those probabilities, like every 10 years, every 20 years, every 15 years, like someone's gonna know it. So like it would be ignorant enough for me to say, even though like I may be like X amount of age, to say that I know everything. So like I always have to take like, and this is how I grow and I learn. I have my perspective, my points of view, my knowledge, but at any point I'm always learning, consuming more knowledge to figure out like how to expand it. It's not like there's not a level that's like you're gonna get like 100%. It's just you just have to constantly grow and change. But the other thing is if you don't take those things, like if you can't grow and change without wanting to learn and be humble about it, right? Because that's like to take learnings, knowledge, and stuff. You have to acknowledge that you don't know, and to say you want to learn more, you have to acknowledge that you have to learn more. So by default, those terms and stuff become like a way that you have to be, humble enough to understand. Like, hey, this is how we then do this, right? I think that the big thing, like too, Kyle worked me, like Steve and Kyle worked with me long enough. Like, I think the interesting part, even when we're going through Agile Craft and those things, or even many of the startups, it's like you're building a product, you're assuming that the product will work, and then sometimes the customers don't buy. But then the things like the pivot or change is when you actually listen to your customers and what they want, and you start understanding to a degree what every customer provides, kind of like the same variation or little nuance. Then you got to take all that feedback and build this like core feature that like not 2 people could use, but then 1,000 people could use. So the thing is like to learn and take the feedback that everyone's been saying, then think in your corner, like how do I onboard like the next N plus customer onto that? That's where like this magic happens, and that's where like lucky enough Kyle got bought by those companies. But the thing is like you learn and understand, and like to do those things you have to listen, and you have to have enough like perseverance and humility to say like, okay, these are things we have to do instead of what I thought 4 months ago that I'm going to do this. You know what I mean? And the thing, the iterations of like hardware is a bit different because there's like so much like barrier of entry in there. But software, like again, like someone could build the next big thing like tomorrow. Like in this world today, we would never have thought that like Google versus like Chat GPT would be where it's at today. Like there's blogs and articles all about that stuff, right? But you would never have thought that would ever occur. And that's why I mean like you could imagine like next year something else may be different. So that's why in this like humility and stuff like that and like constant learning, it's just interesting. You have to always want to constantly grow and constantly learn because there'll never be enough knowledge with everything like coming so fast these days. Like John, I'm not gonna like Kyle's a youngin compared to me and you. I mean, like we didn't touch like I didn't touch a computer till like I remember like we had dial-up internet when I was like 17. You know what I mean? Like and that was only like 1997, right? And then you take 1997 to like now, how fast like things change and stuff. I was doing like Telnet to get my email in.
I vividly remember like first experience with the internet and thinking, oh, this is just for bulletin boards. This isn't going to amount to anything. It's like, but you bring up a great point too about the need. One of the things that we've been exploring too is how much time should be spent trying to anticipate future changes. Your point about who would have seen this coming is a valid one, but yet at the same time, being completely reactive, not trying to get together and talk about what might be, down the road. It doesn't seem like either end of the spectrum is the right place to land. But in tech, especially, we've seen people waste way too much time pretending they're clairvoyant. But how do you look at the balance between trying to get out in front of things, anticipating, if not a year out, at least the next 6 months out, maybe for, your role versus the reality of having just to respond and make fast decisions and that bias for action or execution, as you called it. That's a lot, I guess, in one question, but nobody could have seen Google versus ChatGPT coming, but yet some people were out there, I'm sure, talking about it, right? Did that help them at all, do you think? Can you anticipate and actually do something strategically because of the conversation?
I think like for me, everything should be explored, right? But I think there's a balance, right? So like it's like no, like let's not take tech or whatever, right? And they do this all the time, like with like baseball players and sports players. Like, hey, if we made this mega team and we combined all these people, then you imagine like, hey, if Jordan was with Kobe and stuff like that, then they play these games and who would win? Then you guys would debate about that, right? So now we apply it back to this, right? You could talk about like these things. Someone probably did talk about that like 3 years ago or 2 years ago, right? With this Google ChatGPT. The thing is like, at some point, the rubber meets the road where you're going to have to start building, then get like carve out to a release date. And, you're going to be with 1,000 features for whatever date you pick. You have to pick a date for the first release because it is like, actually, stuff doesn't really begin until after that date, right? Because up to that point, you're just like talking about it. It's all talk. And once you hit like that date and you deliver, then you get customers on it. That's when the real stuff happens. Then the question after that, you had this vision that you're going to do X, Y, Z. Then like after that first date to that vision is like how then you get there. Like how many steps? Where do you go up and down? Like you could go like 100 steps forward and like 99 steps back. And I'm not going to say that's just the progression you're going to have to go to and then go through that stuff. Like the thing is, can you keep the team moving forward? Can you keep the team releasing? Can you keep the team doing things to make sure that they see the goal in sight? And even if you just take it where like, not even say like pass or you fail or you become an IPO or like you lost all your money, like ignore those outcomes, but just think about like, can you keep the team just running to the goal? I think that's the hardest thing through those things. Because like after the first release, then like saying you're going to get to this, no one ever knows really the outcome, right? They all have like a fuzzy feeling that I want to do this or we want to IPO, we want to get bought, And even if you take like what a bunch of my friends did, that's even a small occurrence. There's a lot, but no one talks about like the startups that fail and stuff like that. But does that mean that they failed culturally? Does that mean that they didn't manage the organization correctly or stuff like that? It's not the case. You know what I mean? So like a lot, like there's luck. There's luck into that. But the big thing is like you have your goal out in place, and just keeping your teams moving forward after that first release. And that's what I told my guys, like, we just released a big project here today, like a couple of weeks back. It's funny. The same guy asked me the same question. It's like, how do you know? And like, what are we going to do? It's like, dude, I'll never know. But like, after that first date, once we get customers done, we'll know what our customers think, and we'll just keep pivoting until they like it and keep like, and it's the same. First 10, first 100, first, you keep scaling it out. At some point, you'll get the muscle and stuff like that. Then like they throw a new feature at you, and you'll be like, yeah, we'll build it. That's when it's like complete harmony, Like if you get in that core thing with like 20 or 30 people or even like 1,000 people where you're just chunking out features and like, oh crap, someone built that 3 months ago, let's release it. Or like, this is the feature they want, let's build it really quick, and then it's out in like week. Those are the fun times, you know what I mean? Whether like you IPO or not, you know what I mean? Those are times that you remember, and like those are times when like time, there's no time. You know what I mean? Like I can remember a lot of times when we like built the feature and we were working until like 3:00 in the morning, and we're like, oh, it's 3:00 in the morning. Did someone get food, or like did someone drink water or anything? What was scored in the game? And it's like, probably like the greatest playoff game ever, right? But those are the fun times where like, and those are things that like, that's just, I don't know, that's just being like human, like, and like enjoying life. And that's like, I think that's how we try to keep it mellow in the team.
Yeah. Do you feel like that, in those situations, right? Because it's like you said, right? You kind of, whether it's a team or multiple teams, you get in this situation of flow. And to your point, it's really about moving forward and keeping optionality. You even think about, this, if you take, for example, a big situation like, Google search versus chat GPT, people are talking about those things, but, at some point it becomes a threat. And so there is this element of, do you have the optionality and the ability and the decisiveness to kind of respond to that? Does that, if you think back to some of those scenarios and being in those environments, and yeah, I think those environments are the most positive, the most fun, tend to actually, even render the best outcomes, if they're not kind of super planned and they feel a bit more like serendipitous. But does that feel like that can be like architected to you? Like, how do you, if to me, it almost seems like you could describe it as being incredibly, it's a very decisive environment. Is that something
Yeah,
that it seems like you can kind of like build and foster? And what does that like? And what does that look like?
yeah. I think like for me, like I think about every like permutation and situation. So like I'm constantly thinking about like threats or like stuff like that. But then the thing is like if I put that on a team, I think it'll break them. You know what I mean? So that's the other
Yeah.
thing. Like, so as a leader, you have to be like knowledgeable enough, like what you understand is not, and the context that you understand is not what they understand. But even in there, like I always think like if you could get a feature in, then build it as fast, you're a threat to everyone else because like they have to keep up with the prowessness of like your engineering and like how well you can execute. So I think like faster delivery to a thing is a bigger threat for like every organization that's well planned out and strategy. Because you can't prepare for that, right? Like if you're moving like say 100 miles per hour, like after you get your train oiled up and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And then like if you go to Japan, those trains move fast and like nothing. Amtrak. It's Amtrak, but those things move. Like you're bound to win. Like you have more probability to win at those times. Then the things like if your probability then if you're winning that much, it's just understanding like what wins do you release? Because not every win has to, like if you're running a company, not every win has to be released to the public externally. You know what I mean? And it's just like metering that and modifying that. Because there's also another total aspect that you have to understand. Once you go that fast, like things are producing that fast. It's like, but the customers are not gauging and receiving it that fast. So there's also a balance, like when do you release features or when do you give those, when do you train? Because that's a whole different aspect. You know what I mean? So those are interesting balances that you look at, right? Like this story's always been told this way, right? Like when Apple really built like the iPhone, like if you call it Newton, I forgot what date, but way back when. You know what I mean? It was probably a fabulous, miraculous device. I think they go on eBay for like still a lot of money. I don't know. Somebody could look it up right now and tell me, but it was just the wrong time, right? So the thing is like how do you gauge these things that are coming out, especially in software? They're two different things, right? Like your user base has to be competent enough to use it, willing enough to use it. Then, but there's always points in time when they are, like when you hit like an inflection point, when you could drop these next 10 features on them. So like net, it's like you could move the organization fast. That's one. And like leadership could understand that. But also leadership and like the organization has to understand. When's my customers able to like accept that, receive it, use it to its intended purpose? That's a whole nother thing that I think people also have to observe too, organizations. Like you had it,
Yeah.
Kyle, Steve built a lot of stuff. I mean, you guys did a lot of stuff. It's just
Yeah.
a lot of that stuff hasn't been released. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, do you think about that? Like, do you think about that systematically, by the way? Right. So, yeah, I think especially when it comes to speed, I mean, we always talked a lot about kind of like dead branches, which is like a totally, another thing to kind of like deal with, right? Like really the difficulty of actually kind of stopping doing something is not like that is non-trivial, right? Like in those scenarios when it's like you're building to the point of just having escalation of commitment at that point, right? That's actually impacting, right? Like your ability to actually decide whether or not to to stop something, to pivot, to actually persevere through that. Like, do you think about that kind of systematically as like a process or a way that you kind of evaluate
I
when
used
you got a
to.
bunch of different options?
I used to. I think as like the last 5 to 10 years, like I said, it's like the interesting part. Like I talked to this with my buddy Gabe a lot. Like where we worked at for like so many years, like back in the like Apple and startups, you just get programmed like to scale and stuff like that. And like everywhere else you go after that, it's become so like simplistic, easy stuff like that. So like back then, I used to think like systematically, like this, and like I had to do this, and like if this occurred. Now it's just more like I know like it's like driving. You've been driving for so long. Like I know how to maneuver through the lanes. I know how like it's not like systematically. It's like things come up, and I just say it's like okay, this. So like now it's just flow. Like I just go through it and you know go through the motions. It's not really motions. I just know how to bob and weave. But it's kind of interesting because like my body outlook's not built for bob and weave, but 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 for me, I know how to bob and weave. All this stuff.
How do you think about like if you were to describe, I guess two things. So one is as a leader, how do you think about making and communicating decisions? And second, because you've talked about it a bit already, is also how do you scale that to your teams? Kind of feeling confident that that there's some that teams are making decisions kind of in line with right whatever that model is that either you have or the organization has. Like, so how do you think about that?
Yeah, for me, like how we run the organizations is like in my organization, so like the organizations we're in, like it's fully transparent. So like the communication, everyone kind of knows, like left or right, up, down, what everyone's doing, like within my org, or like actually just within my org. Right? We're still trying to figure out how to communicate it. Basically, if you can handle it within your org, like say all 30, 40 people are good that way, you could do like the 6 degrees of separation. You'll get there at some point, right? Just systematically, mathematically. But my core team, my core people, we know we're fully transparent. There's nothing hiding. Everyone knows what you're doing. It's very family, right? Even how we like hire, like I think after we get through this first tranche of like people that we're bringing on board, like the principle of like how we hire too, it's like they may give me a bunch of headcount. I may not use it all because like it's like having kids. Like you want to bring the right people on and stuff like that. So you think 5 times, 10 times before we hire you, and the team does too. So like, because a lot of it's like you can get by with resources, but you can't get by with like cultural disruptions and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And what was your second point again, Kyle? Just want to make sure I covered.
The second is just how you obviously, right, like have a model for how you make decisions that you're just kind of continuously holding as a leader as things come across, right? Like so think about somebody coming into the organization, or even like a team, how do you kind of scale that across, right? Like that
that's actually simpler for me too. Like so that one, like we have the goals, we have like these like short term and mega goals, right? Then like that's me, and then my team and my org to figure out what goals, how they contribute to that, and they communicate. But like I think the thing is we I don't think we ever miss dates. We just keep delivering. But the big thing is like everyone knows like the value in the system they're in, what they'll provide to the overall goal. It's very clear. It's not like they're writing it down on a piece of paper or stuff like that and like say tick tick tick. No, it's very clear when you're in here, like how you know how to contribute, why you're contributing, and then what value are you contributing to, and like the most simplistic approach I tell these guys, and I tell it every time we hire someone or we like when we bring a new, like get a bunch of people in and we sit down in a meeting, blah blah blah, schedule like some time, like, and it's funny because I always rehearse the same thing and we've been doing it for the last like I think 5 years now. If you're coming on this team, you could be like the greatest product manager, the greatest engineer and stuff like that, but I'm not going to teach you how to do that stuff. I'm going to teach you how to build a product. Then how you build the product, how you launch the product, how you manage the product, and stuff like that. Then in 5 years from now, or 3 years from now, if you tell me that you learned that, hey Lee, I'm going to quit because I'm going to start a startup because I want to do this, or I'm going to stay here and build more products, that's my like metering stage. That's saying that I did a good job. Because it took like someone that was like a service backend developer or a data engineer, or someone that built dashboards for data science, or like someone that knows how to performance tune, then took all those like iterations of those things to be like, you can name companies off the list, right? Like to be like, different products or companies or features or releases. Like the progression that I would like to see is like they take their subject matter expertise, they build a bunch of features, they wrap all those features into products, and then those products are then selling externally, internally, whatever. That's my measuring stick of like progression through like a career and stuff like that. So like these tiers where like if you do it on levels FYI, like those things like ICT forward, like that stuff means meaningless to me. Because at the end of the day, the progression's like, can you take those products? Then other things too, like when you build the products that you're building and stuff like that, are you doing with like the core team? Are you doing like within the culture that we built? Are you not like, are you highly aware how to roll this out, how to talk to people? It's no different than like doing like like at Dynamics, like startups within the startup and stuff like that, and understand that progression. I mean, if I could build like all these like mini startups within the group, what I mean, and like train them how to meet with customers, build a product, same thing, like take your expertise. I'm not a back end service dev, so I started building a service, and now I can launch my service, launch my product. Those are things that's growth for me. You know what I mean? And then what happens, like if you watch that over time, is like everyone starts in that mode, and they look at things in a total different perspective. They're not looking at like, hey, the number of tickets I got, or like how many Jira tickets am I running, or like what's my roadmap. It's just more, it's more flow. You know what I mean? Like my customers want this, we're building this, we're launching this. oh, my customer's saying this, they don't understand the product that is intended. I got to teach them. Those are two different like attributes and stuff that are working. So like I try to keep that culture, that organization that way, because the outcomes become a little bit different to hit and stuff like that. Did that make sense? I hope.
Yeah, no, Lee,
For
that's
sure.
fascinating stuff. And then that concept of startups within a startup, that entrepreneurial kind of approach within a large enterprise, it sounds like you've gotten that running well, which is very difficult. How does that change or affect the decision making in a large organization like that? What maybe you can kind of describe a little bit about if you can get that running, what does that do for a leader like yourself that is now kind of overseeing that? How does that change or improve or influence how
Yeah.
you make?
So those things are interesting, and I think me and Kyle talked about this a lot, like a couple of months ago, or like 2 months ago. Like, so there's these progressions now. Like, it's all about learning and teaching, right? So that if you think about that, so like once you get the flow of like your team building these products and doing like startups or whatever, like products within the startup, start within the startup. The thing after that, it becomes like how do you communicate and teach other people or the organizations how to use those stuff? And like that's where I find like these communities really interesting and like building out these communities which like shared thoughts and shared visions and stuff like that. Because those are good ways in a way like you could get proper feedback, honest feedback, people that will like be your first like design customers on that to work on your products. And those like and with the products and then the communities you launch and you can intertwine those, together that builds like a really strong, cohesive way of like, you know, not even like making money and stuff like that, but just how to service your customer. And then the big thing it answers at the end of the day is like the value that you provide, right? Like if you can answer like if you can understand the things that you build produce this much value for a customer, and then intrinsically or the other way where they can see it and pay for it and want it. That's where it becomes clear to like why you do things. I think that's the biggest thing what everyone always asks. Like all these thoughts about like alignment, leadership, and stuff like that. Like it's basically asking the question like, why did I do this, and then what value did it provide, right? Then everything else. If you can answer those three things, we could write many books about everything else and call it everything else. You know what I mean? But if you can answer those two big questions, those are like the things that change worlds.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting question as far as kind of like what value did it provide, but also the question as far as like, so what does it mean and what are we going to do about it, right? Especially from, even just some of those like leading indicators to understand exactly like what the next step is. Like even if, even in situations where, the value might kind of be right, like much further down the road or
Yeah.
much more like long tail, like how do you think about like breaking, some of that up, right? So being able to kind of really align to, the why, getting to the, what value did it provide, right? Is how do you think about the in between?
So that's interesting. We talked about we had two iterations. We talked about this. I was at Disneyland with my friend, and we were just talking about this. So he
It's a
was
good place to
asking me,
have, deep conversations, just
like
right in front
so
of Space Mountain.
walking the park. No, no, in Rise of Resistance Lightning for 3 hours.
Yeah.
So like if I rewind back like this last project that we just released, I knew I had to hit a date, and then like the other thing was like, and I knew where we started. But if you told me like how we got there, why we did this thing, that thing, like I used to be like before, I used to be really playing like, hey, we have to hit this date for this specific thing, then it opens this up. But now it's like more free. Like I can't tell you how the middle, but I can only tell you the beginning and how we got to that. But I can't tell you like why we went left or why we went right or why we ran fast in between, and I don't know why. But I know for some odd reason, like I could deliver it. So like my analogy to that is like if you drop me in a jungle, there's no map to get like in and out. You just have to get out, right? I think 9 out of 10 times I can always get out. I can tell you that for a fact. If you drop me anywhere in the world, I will always get out and I always hit a date to deliver. But in the middle and stuff like that, how we go through it, organization and stuff, it's just more like you just have to understand when to meter stuff, like when to push, when to pull, when to press harder, when to make sure you nurture. And then like honestly the date after like hitting that date becomes clear. And just like assuming that you have all the value systems, right? Like, hey, we're doing this, we're building a product and stuff like that. Those and like you understand why we're building this, why we're getting this value. Those have to be clear in the beginning. So just say we had that checked off. Now it starts. Now you go through the middle of it. I can't really tell you like what, like if I had to re-examine every decision, or you had to poke at me like why we did this. Like I can't tell you why, but I can tell you at the date. So this becomes interesting, and when you look at these bigger organizations too, it's like a lot of times people care about so much in the middle, and like you look at like a 6-month project or like a 3-month project. A lot of people care about all the little steps or why you do these steps, and you overanalyze every single little step or every little ticket and stuff like that. But in the grand scheme of things, if you take a step back and you actually deliver the product, does it really matter? And like no one's gonna ever hit. If I had 100 features come in and build 100 features out on next day, that never happens too. There's like what if that happens? There's a lot of bad features in that app, right? So like you should only launch like you had 100 things in. There's like 10 core features that you're gonna like get good and like actually get somewhat good and release. You know what I mean? Then go from there and then take. Those are the things that you have to do. So like there's a lot of no's when you go through that process that you have to tell. Hey, we're cutting that. Okay, that could get deprioritized. This gets moved up, and those are the things you have to manage to that degree. I don't think like saying like I just don't think ever in my like as I've been doing this for like the last like five to like 8 years hardcore now. I never know why we hit these dates in the middle. And it's always we always crack up after. Like, why'd you do that stopper? Why'd you take that decision? Like, dude, like, honestly, it was just the right time to do the right call at that right point in time, and we just did it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like one of the important guardrails though is being able to kind of determine. So to your point, right? It's like, hey, all we know is that we need to be ruthless about these no's. And otherwise, we're going to move fast and we'll end up there. And there's a lot of mess in the middle, and that's fine. How do you think about kind of like how do you kind of build those guardrails as far as like making it very clear what you say no to?
Oh, that's interesting.
Well, Kyle, I heard something differently. I think if we oversimplify it, so there's 2 classes of decisions. One decision is do I say no enough? And then, of course, there's which ones do I say no to? What I heard and what Lee was saying is it's very difficult to hold the line and make sure you say no enough. But yet, in hindsight, when you finish and you actually ship it, it's less about which ones you said no to. It's the fact that you were partially successful because you did hold the line and say no. Another example of that is the decision to change. We know that, status quo bias, and it's very hard to commit to a change. Maybe less important to which change you pick first. It's more important that you do commit to the change. So that's what I heard, I guess, Lee, is that.
So the thing in that one, John, like those trust fall things, right? And like you have to commit, right? Like I have to pretend that Kyle's going to catch me, which I don't think that either.
I'm not signing up to that.
Yeah,
I'll make you bob and weave like you promised.
But let's just say there's a trust there, right? And I know Kyle's a good guy, so with all his heart, he'll catch me, right? But
yeah, with all my heart, yeah, with all my lanky heart, yeah.
How come I not know what we both want? But the thing in there is like, yeah, it's commitment, right? And like you have to know, like as a leader and stuff, you have to know, like based on your team's dynamics and like who they are, how many people there. You have to know when to like, not say yes. It's not even say yes or no. When not to, or when to do something, right? And like, how much do you push them, or how far do you push them? And like, because kind of degree after you see this flow for like watch it for a couple of weeks. If I push them this way, I'll get this. But if I want say if I want these like 5 more features or these things, I know I could push them harder, but then they may break. then there's that balance. What do you optimize for, right? Like for me, I always optimize for the team because like there's always time. There'll be always more time to get more build more features. But if I mess up the team or like the culture of my team or anything of that, I will never be able to build these features. So the balance that I have in all those things and like the commitment, even the commitment that like the trust and stuff, like if you take out all those things, it's not like I will always protect the people over like whatever features or products or customers are asking for. I know there's like you may lose money, but then hell, if I lose money, I lose money, right? Or like someone hates me, but like my team is what I protect. There's like I'll get more up at bats later on to build up more features with a good team. It's just statistically will be proven, right?
Nice.
Like
Hey,
people like in like let me just stop. People in the world are like highly are forgiving. Okay, no one's gonna say like, "Hey, you screwed up." Like we're always about like this redemption society and stuff like that. Like everything that we do, right? Like someone fails, then we build them. Like even the movies and sports and everything that we look at culturally. Like you will always get a second chance. You always get another turn. You always get that stuff. But the things that you have to value and the trust and the relationships and all these things that we just talked about in like the last hour is like protecting and working and like loving the people that you work with. I mean, really love them, not just say like this fuzzy like Hallmark stuff. I mean, like really care. Like if they took this step, like you're watching the 10 steps in front of them, so you can take the first 5, but you pivot them. You know, really, really overanalyzing every moment to protect the team because
It does. Yeah, and protecting the team doesn't have to be a Hallmark special. I mean, the idea of value creation works in both ways, right? You can provide more to the customer by delighting them, but also that team protection is absolutely, about thinking about how the employee experience and making them happy is part of that value equation. So, um, I think putting that in those terms that it's not just because it's the right thing to do, but it's part of the value equation. It's just the bottom part, not the top part. I love that argument because at the end of the day, and you said it even better, which was if I lose the team, I can't do anything to delight the customer tomorrow, and that is incredibly strong.
Yeah. Like that's
Yeah.
if all the uncertainty that's one thing that's certain. You know what I mean? Like how do you value your organization? Because like if all that is good and crisp and clean and everyone uncertainty becomes a lot easier. You know what I mean? Like it's just whatever. Like life is uncertain, right? Like, if I asked my grandfather from like when he was born, like when he wouldn't tell me like there's like a theory. Even if I followed that to a T, it would be a total different life, right? So like it's just you just gotta take them as you go and go from there. Like what are you gonna do? Like be a worrywart and predict every single moment, every single thing that's gonna happen? Try
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. It's funny that I mean there really is kind of an emotional state and a good one even kind of like within a team that's kind of part of that flow, which is we'll figure it out, right? And that's that's not really kind of something that you can measure, right? I mean people do their best work when they're motivated and have purpose and have I mean really a lot of the psychological safety to be able to make mistakes. I think the combination of what you're talking about there, that's kind of like you know part speed, but also this kind of like trust and camaraderie and like what a team is especially in decision making, right? Is it's better it's better to move fast and be right like
Yeah.
90% wrong than it is to move slow and be 60% wrong, right?
Yeah.
And that's really interesting, and that is something that does require like not getting to certainty and building kind of intricate plans, but it really is. I mean that's a trust fall, right? And it really is a trust exercise and something that you build over time.
Yeah, it's crazy because like whoever like I thank the people who hire me. They have to trust that like they're able to they're able to deliver in the way I operate, right? And that even is that's another big thing, right? Like does your leadership, your management trust you to do that? You think also like my part, I have to like deliver. Any human being, right? every person that works. I have to deliver something to before I ask for X, Y, Z, right? So there also has to be like ownership and leadership in my perspective to make sure my teams operate that way. But like, it's it's no difference than like any like marriage or family or thing like that. There's trust that has to be built for you guys to execute or live like this life or live like this work life that you want to produce, right? And then the people in it, the friends that you build, I could call Kyle up to talk to my guys or any one of my friends, and to tell them the same thing. Like it's that community, that thing that we build together. Wherever, whether you're at NVIDIA or where you're at this company or this company, like we all share the same thing, that we all want to see what's best for the next person and the success for both companies, right? Like Steve and Kyle, John, call me anytime. I'll do whatever, bend over backwards, to make sure you guys get like whatever help I need. You know what I mean? Likewise, if I ask you guys, it's the same thing. So that's how I run my teams, right? That's pretty much it.
Yeah, and that's a really good point about just the relationship in situations with a lot of uncertainty. A team relies on the trust they have with each other, right? Think of the military, right? We hear that over and over again. Can't prepare for what you're going to see on the field of battle, but we're going to prepare you with training and empower you to make great decisions along the way. That's all trust. That's all trust, and a lot of what you were just covering there. And then the converse of that is we've also seen situations where uncertainty grows, trust can erode really quickly. Think in a toxic organization. So that balance between trust and uncertainty is one that I don't think we've talked enough about that yet. And thank you for bringing that up.
That's a thin, fine line. Like there's a lot in there. Like we can unpack that in another call, but that is a lot.
Yeah, we actually that'd be a good one to do. Yeah, at a later time for sure. Hey, last question, Lee, since we're coming up on time here. And just a practical one to close out. We've talked about a lot here, but kind of any kind of specific technique or something that you've found very helpful in your career that feels like something that's just kind of like one step away, and particularly when it comes to just managing uncertainty and being decisive.
Yeah. So like I do like it. I used to write it down when I was younger, and then like the thing is like there's like 3 things that I want to accomplish every day. Right? But then it's now in my head, so it's just like it's because I've been doing it so long. So every day there's just 3 things that I want to do. I try to knock those out every day. Then what I do is like I take every month, every quarter, or like every year, and those 3 things, if you did that every day, like if you just do 365 times 3, that's like 1,000, like 1,100 items. Because maybe I had a couple more. I mean, that's a lot of work. So if you just do those things, and that's what I mean, just taking like, and have your organization take the steps and trust that you do that. Like that's the amount of work that you can produce. You know what I mean? And like, 3 things aren't hard, right? You have to do 3 things. Just do 3 things, like simple things. And the complexity of those 3 things will get more complex and stuff like that. But it just builds up. Even if you didn't hit the number for 3. But if you did it over, like if you look at the course of time, there's still a lot of items. Or even if you did 1 item a day, it's still 3, like, but it's just showing that you're accomplishing something. And it's good, like affirmation and feedback for you and your organization that, you're doing that. So like, how that translated to like my organization, stuff like that. For like the week, like, and like we still do this, but I think even the guys that are with me now, they reported to me before, so they kind of do it in their head too now. So, like, what we used to do is like every week or every day they write down everything they did, 3 things, and look at the week. Then that's their review, basically. That's how they give me that every month, and we discuss like, hey, on our 1-to-1, blah blah blah. And then they give it to me in 1 month. Because like the only reason I did that because I was really lazy. I didn't want to write the review at them because I would. It's so hard to write a review. Hey, what did this guy do for a whole year? No, so we essentially did that. So they wrote the review. That's like easy for me, but it became like a process that we did. But like as the older people started reporting to me, like it was really easy to craft that. But it's the essence of just showing steps and like how many steps you progress and stuff like that. So
yeah,
that's
which is something that. Yeah, which I think you can even boil down. It's like which are really kind of difficult things in practice. Being just like focus accountability and like consistency,
Yeah.
which I also think is interesting from just the accountability perspective, is just, not only, the three things, but sharing those three things and kind of, being consistent and accountable for, for those things, which is
Yeah.
really cool. This was awesome. Lee, thanks a ton for taking the time. John, thanks for coming in from your the set of Cabin in the Woods. Just going out there, but yeah, awesome. Thanks again, Lee. This was great. I feel like we've come out of this with a few more topics that we could cover, in the future as well. And thanks for, you're always someone that's willing to help and give advice. So appreciate that as well.
Cool.
But yeah, thanks.
Thanks, guys. Look to see you guys again.
Yeah, good to see you
Thank
later.
you.